Well, hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Purposeful Marketing Podcast. If I sound out of breath, that's because I am. I'm so excited for this topic. It's literally leaving me speechless. And I'm excited again because our friend of the program, Brendon, is here. Also, an alum from Gorilla 76, still working there, senior strategist. And he wanted to come on the show to talk about something that I love so dearly, and that is history. And also, we may take it different places as well. If you're new to this show, we like to have conversations that we know that we love, and hopefully you can find some insight, some ideas, some energy from those conversations too. So here's another one I'll throw at you. So today, to start us off, Brendon, you've been doing some interesting things on TikTok. I also know you have a history podcast about a specific subject in time. I'm just going to give you the floor. Like, why do you love history, and how does that help you be a better marketer?
Yeah. I love history just because it's just stories, right? It's about people, like from a long time ago, more recent, but like it all just boils down to like, we're all the same. We've always been the same. And I think there's a lot that you can learn there. And like, I love stories. I love Lord of the Rings and fantasy stories, but there's just something about like, why did this country decide to go to war with this country and what happened afterwards? And then what could have happened if something else, like one minor insignificant thing would have changed? Like the whole world could have been different. There's always that butterfly effect when talking about history that is really interesting. So yeah, that is really interesting to me about history. I specifically love military history. My background, I have 13 years in the Minnesota National Guard. I'm an intelligence officer. So yeah, like just learning about things that have happened in the past help prepare me for the things that I might need to deal with in the future. Because things never change. History never changes, So yeah, but it's always about people. Like the stories are about people, and specifically with military stuff, like you have to deal with the enemy, you have to deal with the terrain, you have to deal with the weather, you have to deal with super long supply chains, like you have to deal with crazy personalities. It's like the most egotistical people become leaders of militaries, and you always get just interesting things out of that. So that's why I like it. Just the stories are amazing.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue. And I think as marketers, we should be storytellers. That's a theme we've talked about on this show in specific. We've used it with narrative, talk about the narrative. Mm-hmm. We used it about making good content. The one thing I want to linger on, because I think it's interesting, when you combine military and history, I think something that stuck out with me is like this idea that there's a villain. Mm. I think you can almost utilize that in a marketing strategy as well, right? We know products who have tackled this way too. It's like they're the competitors. We do it differently.
Yeah,
they're the villain. Like, okay, does that entice you? Is that something you thought about before?
I guess I haven't really thought about that, but that is really interesting. Like, think of like some like the great marketing campaigns of the past, right? Apple versus Microsoft. When Apple came out with I think it was for the iMac, right? And then they had Justin Long as their spokesperson, and then there was a buttoned up, the Microsoft guy is like, oh, Apple's way different than Microsoft. We're not the buttoned up tie wearing dudes. Like we wear jeans and a pullover, and we're cool, right? So you have that one, and then like the classic one between BMW and Mercedes, like they always go back and forth with really interesting stuff. What are some other good ones? Like Pepsi.
Oh, that one with the rental car one. What was that? Remember where that rental car company was like, we're the second best. Like they owned like the second best, and they ended up stealing market share.
Yeah. Who was that? Shoot. It probably doesn't matter.
I don't know if it was Hertz or if it was a company that stole it from Hertz, like
Avis.
NASCAR or something. Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. It is Avis. Yeah.
Avis,
you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, okay, because that's the other thought I had with this topic, which was energizing me, is like, I think history repeats itself. I think marketing repeats itself. Yeah. I think if anything, you just use the Apple example, and like now how Windows is using Justin Long. It's like that is a combination of history and marketing repeating itself. So I think there's something so fascinating about that. In particular, go ahead.
Like it's not always competition that's the enemy of marketing, right? It is the old way of doing things. It is the inefficient way to do something, right? Like, so there, like in almost every marketing story you try to tell, like there is you want to have that transformation, right? Your product is going up against some problem. So the problem is the enemy in most of our, like, especially in B2B marketing, right? Like we're not doing a lot of competition campaigns, but it is the way that you're doing, like the manual way you're doing it right now sucks. Like, let's go automated. Let's use our solution to make your life better, right? So it's not really, a competitor is the enemy, but just like an idea or like a bad way, an old way of doing something is wrong. And let's do something new.
Okay, yeah, let's dive deeper in that because I think that's interesting. Is almost our customers, our clients' customers, they have a deep history with the product and services that they're used to.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you understand history, kind of like what you're saying, Brendon, like you almost anticipate that. It's like, okay, what do we need to say differently?
Yeah.
What is the new way?
Yeah.
What is the villain now?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see yourself doing that? Like I'm unlocking something with history. Maybe we should all study history more.
We should. Everyone should, because it does repeat itself. And okay, but back to your question, Aaron. Yeah, I have thought about that a little bit. And how do I want to say this? Aaron, can you repeat the question again? I lost it.
No, and of course we're having live dialogue. It's perfect. I think really what is on my mind is like, how do you use history in your strategy? Mm-hmm. Like, is this something that comes to the forefront?
So I think the first thing to think about with, history is like, it will repeat itself. So if you're continually running campaigns and things aren't changing, you're just going to keep getting the same thing until you change something. Right. And so like, if you don't recognize that, every 80 years we go into an economic downturn, if you don't change anything in year 70, you're going to have the downturn in 80, right? Like, things keep happening and they always will happen in a cycle, and marketing's the same way. So if you don't ever break the cycle, you're not going to break how your previous marketing is going, right? Like, if your strategy has always been trade shows, you're going to have the same results you've always gotten. And I think you get diminishing results as time goes on with marketing, right? Like, so 20 years ago, your trade show strategy was probably rocking, doing really good stuff. And it's like, well, that worked really well back then. But you cycle that forward, diminishing results as you go along. Nothing's going to change until you change something, right? Like, and then people change. People are always changing. Look at like fashion, right? Like, fashion trends always change. And if you don't keep up with it, you become a nerd, right? Like, so you have to like move with the history, move with the people. So like, before we started this, we were talking about customer interviews. That's the only way to like understand where people are at. Talk to them. Like, where are people at now? So if you want to break through your cycle, you got to talk to the people that you're trying to sell to.
So, okay, let's linger on that one too. And before I do, Mary, you have any questions? I'm really digging this conversation. So
yeah, I know, this is awesome. Well, no, mine was just going to be on like, especially, so I love that you talked about just like history in general, like trends in history, stories in history. What I think that you brought that's so special to Gorilla 76 is like that military background. Mm-hmm. So specifically in military history, because I think the way that military history differs a little bit from like, the rest of history, if you will, is like the military is broken down by strategic processes. And you brought a lot of those ways of thinking and that process oriented thinking. So do you think, I saw it affect the like internal strategy at Gorilla 76. Do you feel like you bring that to your clients too?
Yeah, I try to. Marketing is a piece of a business strategy, right? And it's like the same thing with like let's look at like World War II, right? The United States and the Allies had a single strategy as, part of the conflict. We want to beat the Axis, right? But then that strategy gets split up into Europe theater, Pacific theater, right? So in Europe, we had a strategy with the end goal of defeating and destroying the Nazi regime. We had the same thing in the Pacific, right? We needed to defeat and destroy the Japanese Empire, right? And then now we got to break it down even further. All right, so in Europe, we had land campaigns, and then we had two land campaigns, right? We had the United States and British campaign going east to Berlin, and the Soviet campaign moving west to Berlin, right? And so like there's multiple strategies in there. So you have to like break it down till you get to the tactical piece, right? So if you're looking at a whole business, like let's look at a manufacturing company, right? They have an overall business strategy, right? We want to grow revenue and profit by X percentage this next fiscal year. Well, to do that, we have to create strategies in each of our like action departments. Like we have like in the military, like action forces, right? Like that, and that's the force that is actually going to go out and do the strategy, right? So in business, we're looking at like, so there's the marketing strategy, the sales strategy, What's your, operations or manufacturing strategy? What's your customer service strategy? What's your financial strategy? And then I think that's kind of where the strategic part ends in the business world, right? So like you create like your overarching marketing strategy, and then you have the different plans or tactics within that, right? So like here's our overarching marketing strategy, and then we have like a digital plan. Here's our traditional plan, and those all feed into that larger strategy. And then you go further down, so you have the plan, and then now let's break it down with the tactics, right? Here's our digital tactics that fill into the digital plan, right? So we're going to do demand generation, we might do lead generation, we might do ABM. Like those are all your tactical plans that fall underneath the strategic plans. And then the manufacturing guys have their own plans under those strategies. So it's like it's pretty similar here. And then even like when you're looking on the military side, let's say European theater, the Allies are moving forward, right? So we have the strategy and the end goal of defeating the Nazis. Okay, so to do that, we have to move east across Europe. How do we do that? Well, now we have to start figuring out like what is our end goal. So this is where to me where strategy, you have to think about strategy, right? You need an end goal, right? So we need to defeat the Nazis. We have to know where we start. All right, so the Allied forces are starting in Britain, right? Because the Nazis have fought all the way to France. They've invaded France, conquered France. So the Allies are located in the UK. Okay, so that's where our starting in the UK, but we need to get to Berlin. Okay, so then what do we have available to us? Well, all we really have is the United States and the British forces available to us. How do we now, and then what resources do we have? All right, so we have, this many divisions, we have this many tanks, this many soldiers, this many aircraft. So you have to know, where are you going? What do you have available to you? And then what is your overarching plan to get there, right? Like we knew we had to attack Europe in two places. We had to invade France, do D-Day at Normandy, land in France, and then move across Germany. But we also had to land in North Africa to get into Italy, right? So we had that kind of a two-prong attack in there. And then we needed support from the Soviets on the east, right? So we need to put pressure on Berlin from three different areas to put Hitler in a bad position. And then our strategy in the Pacific was basically we're going to eliminate every single Japanese outpost, bit by bit with Navy and Air Force and Army and the Marines. So that's kind of like, where are you going? Where are you? What resources do you have? And then what's the plan to get there? And the same thing with marketing, right? So what is your goal, right? So where we want to go, revenue and profit, right? That's what we're thinking about. Where are we starting? Well, this is the things that I have. Where am I starting from? This is where my current revenue and profit are. This is what, like, how many leads I currently bring in. Like, I know, like, how many, what percentage of, hopefully you know this, what percentage of leads turn into opportunities and what percentage of opportunities turn into closed won customers. So then you can start, working back. So if I need to increase revenue by 10%, that means I need to increase opportunities by X percent. And so to get to the revenue or the opportunity number, I need to increase leads by X percent, right? So you understand where you're coming from. What resources do you have? How much budget do you have? Who is in your marketing department? Is it just you? Do you have a team? What subject matter experts do you have? Are they available for you to create content with? Do you have any agency partners? And then what is the plan, right? Like, yeah, so we're going to do digital demand gen. We're going to do this traditional marketing thing. Maybe we're going to do radio. I don't know. That's what your strategy is. Where are you going? Where are you? What resources do you have? And what's the plan?
This is perfect. Let's mash this all together because I think we are getting somewhere. So what you're saying, what resonated with me is, again, you have to have a goal.
Yep.
Our motivation, specifically in history, you can find a lot of that. You need facts. In a client's marketing strategy, you need to understand revenue, win rates, all that stuff. Those are numbers. Those are facts, right? Just like you have in a history. And the other piece that I want to kind of dive in more is like context setting. And I think that's maybe where we can really combine history and strategy together.
Mm-hmm.
Is our clients, they don't understand like what happened before, right? And they need help to understand how we can repeat history moving forward, the good history, right? Is we need more revenue. How do you deal with that, like with your clients? Do you use your lessons on history to do it? Like, how do you set the context?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to the story, right? So like with marketing, a lot of our context comes down to positioning and that strategic narrative, right? Our go-to-market messaging. When you're going to war, there's also all that context, and especially like in the way that America goes to war now, like the president of the United States has to sell this war to Congress so that they could sign off on it, right? But like you even go all the way back. Like I just on the Monday Morning General podcast, on my military history podcast, we just talked about the Battle of Hastings, and the context there was King Edward the Confessor died. He was the king of England at the time, and he died, and there was a huge succession crisis. And 3 men had legitimate claims to the throne, and they had armies to back those claims up. And so they can go to their people and say, you need to fight for me because, William the Conqueror wants to invade and destroy our land. The Vikings also want to come to England and destroy. And so like the English are sitting there like, we're trying to maintain our way of life. And if so, please, people of England, to come and join the army so that you can fight off the invaders. And then William the Conqueror is like, well, I need to raise funds and raise an army. And think of all the riches we could have if you join me. I will make you nobility. I'll give you land if you come and fight with William the Conqueror to take over England. What's the story that you're going to tell your customer, or you're going to tell your customers to buy from you, right? This is the old way that you're doing it. It's not efficient. It hurts. Your workers don't want to work with you anymore because it's really hard to work with you. You're losing money. It takes too long to build something. All the things that are out there. And then what's your solution, right? So like give the context of the problem that your customers are having and then sell them on that at scale. That's what marketing is. Just tell people about their problems and how you solve them.
I love it, because I think the idea that was coming in my head from what you're talking about is you need the context setting to turn facts into impact.
Yes.
And when I think of history, right, is I can tell you that the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated. Like, I know that's a fact. I would have to ask you or go to Wikipedia to understand like what was the impact of that, which I remember it being pretty big. And I think that's what we can also do within our marketing strategy and like the historicals of looking at everything is what really matters. I think that's what's really hard doing strategy, as you both are the strategists, I'm looking at both of you, is understanding like, what should I do? There's only so many things I can do. What's the most impactful? Yeah. Just to toss it to you, Mary, have you thought about this before? Are you dealing with this right now? Like looking at the history of Map My Customers, like, what are you thinking?
Oh, absolutely. Like the thing that I keyed in on both Brendon's like World War II metaphor and the William the Conqueror is like, you have to remember, like, we're hearing about those stories and we know they won. So it's easy for us to draw conclusions like because they won, blah, blah, blah. When they executed that, when they planned that strategy, it was still a risk. They didn't know if they were going to win. It wasn't a 100% guaranteed plan, right? And that's exactly how I'm thinking about it with Map My Customers is like, I want to take big jumps. I want to take big ideas. I want to do big plans because those are the ones that make an impact if you win. And if if I lose, like, okay, obviously the stakes are much higher in war in like military history. For me, it's just, okay, my plan failed and I would just go back to the drawing board for the next big idea. But in my opinion, and I'm sure Brendon agrees because, we spend time, and I know Aaron agrees because we spent a lot of time working together, is like, you have to do big ideas. You have to take big risks.
Another idea of history that I want to return to that happened 10 minutes ago. So if you're listening, go 10 minutes back. We were talking about customer interviews, and something that just was like an aha to me with history is when you talk to customers, you get the personal history of someone and their personal pain points and their personal path with this product or service. That is so powerful. Those are literally living biographies of how someone's using your company, that category, that product, that service. I think I'll kind of give you the floor, Brendon. Again, you do a lot of customer interviews. What do you think about that? Should we do more biographies of talking to customers and collecting that history?
Yeah, like I'm not an engineer, or like for Mary's case, Mary's not a salesperson, right? Mary's not in the field like trying to sell things. She's not. She's a head of marketing. I'm a marketing strategist. Same thing with you, Aaron. Like the only way for us to create effective marketing plans is to know who we're marketing to. And you're right. Like it is like the only way to know about certain people in time is to read about them and try to and the best stories from history always come from the primary source, right? Like once we start looking at a secondary or a tertiary source, that makes the history more diluted, and you don't know what biases and other garbage is kind of mixed into that narrative. But if you talk to somebody that was there and experienced, and you have that primary source, now you have some truth that you can build off of. And it's the same thing here. Like, I mean, you could go out and hire a marketing research firm to do this for you, and there's still probably you're still going to pull some good stuff out of it, but it's not going to be as good as going right to the source, right? And like being able to have a conversation and understand what a person's going through when they're using a CAD software. Like, let's say you sell CAD software. Well, if somebody's using this old CAD software, like, yeah, it takes forever to load. I don't have a good visual of what my part looks like. It takes me X amount of time to build things in here, and it takes me X amount of time to train on using the software. If you don't ever ask them those questions, you're never going to know that, and so you're never going to be able to create impactful messaging because you don't know the history, you don't know that story that person has. It's like we talked about earlier, just like history is so cool because it is that story about people, and that's what's cool about marketing is it's like a story about people. It's like it's just about us. But so you have to ask them, like, don't be scared, just go talk to them and like try to understand what their life's about and what it's like for them to work every single day. Like they show up to a job 9 to 5 every day. What is that like for them? And how can you make that a little bit better for them?
I'm sold on history and marketing combining. I think it's great. I do have other questions. Mary, did you have other surprise questions you want to throw at us? Or?
No, not yet. I'll see if any pop up after yours.
Okay, cool. So one of the thoughts I've had recently is when us marketers, like where we spend our time kind of matters. And I was reading a lot of marketing books, listening to a lot of marketing podcasts. We did an episode on this, like when you say goodbye to your marketing gurus. I got to imagine, like, Brendon, you spend your time making a history podcast, probably reading history books, listening about history. Like, do you think that has I mean, we've kind of already talked about it, but that's had to have a huge impact on your marketing career. Like, could you make the case for everyone to read more history, to consume more history?
Yeah. And if you pick the right person, you learn about history, but then you also learn about storytelling too. Like, there's 2 history podcasters that I adore. I love Dan Carlin, Hardcore History Podcast, and then Mike Duncan, History of Rome Podcast, and then Revolutions Podcast. Both of those series are now done, but they're able to digest the history for you because a lot of the stuff is really dense and it's hard to get through. Military reports and bills for politics and just all that stuff, but they're able to synthesize this into really great stories. So if you want to learn about real storytelling, listen to those guys because they're really great at it.
No, again, I think my biggest insight is just spend your time doing what you love, and it's probably to make you a better marketer.
Yeah.
And hearing you talk, I'm energized right now. I'm like, heck yeah, I love history. Another question to kind of segue us is
the other thing too,
go ahead.
You could pull out the the things that are relevant to you too, right? Read a whole book about the American Revolution. Well, maybe there's 1 or 2 things that really interest you about that, but it's gonna be the same. There's gonna be when you interview somebody or you maybe do this marketing camp, it just helps you to learn how to pull out impactful information. A lot of it is going to be dense and you're not going to enjoy a lot of the history stuff that you read, but when you do read it and you start to digest it and play around with it in your head, you start pulling those stories out and interesting things that people are talking about. So yeah, I just studying history lets you and then you start seeing trends these people in England back in 1066 with William the Conqueror had these problems, but then you go and jump ahead 1,000 years to World War II. It's oh man, same problems. And then I jump over here to marketing. Oh, same problems. We all have the same problems, for all of human history. So it's yeah, you just I know, Aaron, you have a philosophy background, but it's kind of 2 sides of probably the same coin, right? There's kind of the theoretical thought on the philosophy side, but then the practical side of on the history and just learning how people think both through history and then also through philosophy, I think is super important to building up empathy and and just pulling those story threads out of things. I think it's made me a much better marketer than I would have been without it.
Love it. And I think since you mentioned philosophy, theme of the show, asking the why. This is why we want to have these conversations because we're tasked with these tactics every day. We're asked to do these executions. We're required to report on ROI, but I want us to ask the why are we doing it? Mm-hmm. And that's the most important thing for me and makes me a better marketer. Another just question I had for you as you're starting your TikTok journey, doing history posts, just any comments about TikTok? Have you enjoyed it? What have you learned?
Yeah.
Just give me that spiel.
TikTok's been a lot of fun. I used to I tried to start up a YouTube series on the Civil War, and it was really hard because doing videos is really hard. Thank God we have videographers that know how to do editing, because it is ungodly difficult if you have no idea how to do it. So TikTok makes it a lot easier for a layman like me to get in there and just start creating content without the huge barrier to entry of Adobe Premiere or whatever else your software is. So TikTok just makes it a lot of fun, and so it reduces the time to creation. The other thing that has been interesting with TikTok is you don't have a lot of time to say something. It's not an hour-long podcast. And so, like, how do you tell this specific story or, provide this one insight in a way that captures people's attention, and you can do it in a short enough time where you can get your message up before they scroll up again. So, like, it's just like, it helps you condense your message down into, like, the bullet point, which goes right into just, like, marketing, right? Like, people are scrolling through their phone, Facebook, LinkedIn, and like what can you do to get them to stop for a moment to hit that see more button and read the 600 characters that you're allocated to tell that little bit of story that you have, and then like how do you break up, like talking about, we did an episode on Antietam, the Civil War battlefield, and I tried to tell a bunch of stories on TikTok through there. Like, so you can't tell like the whole story about a battle in one TikTok video. But this was like, how do I like layer a series together and create a story, over multiple videos that tell a more cohesive story. So that's been interesting. Is like, how do I condense things down into one video, and then how do I layer those videos together to kind of tell a story through time that is logical and makes sense and makes people want to stay and go to the next video. And then how do I get them to like then go into the podcast to hear more information? So that's been a like good like little marketing challenge to like just tell condensed stories. Because like no one wants to listen to a company talk about themselves for an hour on a podcast. No one wants to do that. But they might listen to you for a minute. What can you do in 60 seconds to tell your story and convince people that your solution is the right one?
Yeah, I think that's something we all need to work on. Mary, TikTok questions? Any questions for Brendon before we wrap up here?
No, I love that you have that flywheel too of like content creation and distribution, because I was on that like full funnel summit and I listened to this speaker, and he was saying if you were only going to do one episode, so like let's say you make this series and you're doing your military thing, if you only do one, you might as well do none. So I love that, like, Aaron and Brendon and I were just talking about this before we hit record. It's just like we just keep showing up. So the fact that Brendon, you're even like continually showing up, you're trying to tell your story a little bit better every time, I think that matters almost just as much as the story you're telling in and of itself.
Yeah. Just keep showing up, because eventually you're going to be the one left, or, one of the few left. What's the stat like for podcasts? Isn't it like 90% of people don't make it to episode 20, or like 99% of people don't get to episode 20, right? So if you get to 21 episodes, you are the top 1% podcaster in the world.
Yeah.
Right? If you just
keep
showing up on LinkedIn, like what's the stat? There's a stat there too, right? Like 10% of people on LinkedIn are like consistent contributors.
Yep.
Something like that. Like, so you just keep showing up, and eventually like you're going to be the one left in your niche that's going to be still talking. So just don't give up, and but like figure out a way to make it sustainable, right? Like I've had a couple people already on the military history podcast. Like, we want more like weekly episodes. And it's like, I appreciate your enthusiasm. I want to do more too, but I can't. I have kids. I got a job. I have a military job. Like, I have a lot of stuff going on. So weekly podcast, probably not the right thing for me to do this sustainably over the long term. So, but I appreciate the enthusiasm. So yeah, just like got it consistently and sustainably, so that you can do it consistently for a long time.
Deb, I think we can wrap on that point. Is you have to show up to have your history written down, and if you want to be a better marketer, do that piece.
Yeah.
So
again, history is always written by the winner, right? Like, so if you want the history written about you, make sure you win.
And that's what we're doing. We're winning here. Brendon, where can the folks find you, or how do you want people to contact you?
Yeah. For marketing stuff, you can find me at linkedin.com. Just search for Brendon Forrest. You'll find me there. Senior strategist at Gorilla. So Brendon.Forrest at gorilla76.com. Got a marketing podcast, The Manufacturing Marketer. It is, Mary used to be on that with me. It's a Brothers Marketing podcast. So join me there. IndustrialMarketingLive.com. Every other week we do get together webinar kind of series with a bunch of industrial marketers. And then if you're interested in military history, join me on the Monday Morning General podcast. Every other Monday, me and my buddy Bjorn drop some knowledge on you on battles throughout history. So we just did Hastings, and we are currently recording and editing down the Battle of Midway, Pacific Theater of World War II. So episode 1 is all about the road to war. How do we get to the battle? And then, the strategies and the things that happen leading up to the battle. And then during the battle, or the second episode is all about the tactics of the battle. So we'll give you the down and dirty details, play by play of what happened at the battle. And then what could have happened if, the Confederates had won at Antietam. Maybe the Civil War would have turned out a lot differently. Maybe. So yeah, Monday Morning General podcast, whatever podcast player you use, we're there. Look for us. It's good. And then Brendon Forrest on TikTok. So all the places, just look for me in all the places. I'll probably be there.
You're everywhere. And I think that's the best place to be if you want a good history. I'll put some of that in the show notes for our listeners here, just to give us the final spiel, as I always do. This is available wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Google. We are taking guests. I made a joke about it last time.
This is where the podcast is.
Yeah, that's where the podcast is. Also on YouTube. We are taking guests. I made a joke about it last episode. I've had 3 people reach out to me since then. So it's a real thing. No more jokes. This is the best way to build relationships, is having great conversations about marketing. So I'll have anybody on to talk about anything. I appreciate you all. Have a good one. Thank you, listeners.